Imagine this for a second. What if the entire human story, in all its incredible diversity, could be vividly read just by looking at the faces of people in one single country?
It sounds like a pretty bold claim, doesn't it?
It really does. But today, that's exactly what we're exploring. We're using the United States as this unique lens.
We're diving into that extraordinary physical diversity you see right across the USA.
Yeah, everything from skin tones and hair textures to eye colors, heights, facial structures, things that just defy any single easy definition.
And to really unpack this fascinating story for you, we've dug into a pretty rich stack of
What
sources.
kind of things are we talking about?
Well, historical accounts of migration. For starters, detailed U.S. Census Bureau data, some really cutting-edge genetic studies, I think they were from 2017, and also some insightful analyses of cultural shifts.
Okay, got it. And our mission for you, the listener, as we guide you through all this, is to really pull out the most important insights. We want to get at why Americans look so wonderfully different from each other. So, all right, let's really dig into how migration, history, and culture have sort of collided to create this incredible human mosaic.
Okay. So one of the most striking things that our sources really emphasize right from the get-go is that no single ancestral group can possibly define the USA.
Right. That seems fundamental.
It is. This isn't a nation built on just one origin story. It's more like a foundation that's been continuously layered over time by populations from, well, all across the globe.
That feels like a really crucial distinction, especially, given how some narratives tend to simplify history. How did that initial layering even begin? What were those first groups that sort of created this complex tapestry?
Well, if you go way back to the founding, the initial European settlers were primarily English, German, and Irish.
Okay.
Then, as the country grew and, matured, you had waves of Italian, Polish, and Jewish immigrants adding to those numbers.
But that was just the start, right?
Oh, absolutely. That was just the initial thread, really. Over centuries, you have African Americans, Native peoples, Latinos, Asian Americans. They all progressively layered into this foundational mix. It's this dynamic, ongoing process that continually reshapes the demographic landscape.
And you can literally see how that continuous layering has reshaped the face of the nation. The United States is now home to over 330 million people.
Yeah, with origins in pretty much every region of the globe. It's incredible.
And according to the U.S. Census Bureau data, nearly 40% of Americans now identify as part of a racial or ethnic minority group. 40%.
But here's where it gets really interesting looking forward.
Yeah.
The implications of this layering go even deeper when you look at the projections.
What are I saying?
Get this. By 2045, the U.S. is actually expected to become majority-minority.
Majority-minority. What does that mean exactly?
It means no single group, including non-Hispanic whites, will hold a majority share of the population.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's not just a statistic, is it?
Not at all. It's a profound shift. It fundamentally rewrites the visual landscape of the nation, and it really sets the stage for all the physical diversity we're about to explore.
Okay, that's a massive shift in a relatively short time frame. And it must dramatically influence the canvas of physical traits we see. Let's start with eye color. Our sources show how even something like eye color reflects both deep roots and really rapid change in the U.S.
Yeah, it's a great example. Those 2017 genetic studies give us a really clear snapshot. So around 27% of Americans have blue eyes.
Okay.
And that's mostly concentrated among folks with Northern and Eastern European descent. Then you've got hazel and green eyes, making up roughly 18% combined.
So almost half the population has blue, green, or hazel eyes?
Getting close. But the majority, it's significant 55% of Americans have brown eyes. And the darker shades are, as you'd expect, more common among African, Asian, and Latino populations.
But the really remarkable thing here is the speed of change, right?
Yeah, exactly. Back in the 1900s, about half of U.S. newborns had blue eyes. Today, it's fewer than 1 in 4.
That's a huge drop in just over a century. Our sources point to intermarriage as the main driver.
That's what the research suggests, yeah.
Yep.
Widespread intermarriage is diluting the frequency of blue eyes over generations.
So how does that connect back to what you were saying about the majority-minority projection? Are these kinds of individual physical changes, like eye color, sort of like microcosms of that bigger demographic story?
You've hit on a really critical point there.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. What's fascinating here and what the researchers found is how a seemingly simple biological shift driven by something as common as intermarriage now becomes a flashpoint.
A flashpoint for what?
For deeper societal anxieties, really, Our sources mention these heated online debates. It's not just about eye color itself. It taps into this bigger idea of a dominant American look or identity, and whether that whole concept is just, well, becoming obsolete.
So the intensity of those debates shows how much our physical traits are tied up in our sense of belonging.
Absolutely. It's tied into our national self-perception. It is a microcosm, like you said,
Yeah.
but one that really reflects this broader ongoing negotiation of, who are we as a nation?
Right. Okay, so if eye color shows one specific trait shifting, then skin tone. Well, skin tone feels like maybe the most vivid example. It's like a living tapestry, really narrating centuries of ancestry mixing in the U.S.
It truly is. Skin pigmentation in the U.S. reflects that incredibly complex history perfectly. Take African Americans, they make up about 13.6% of the population,
Right.
and they carry these wonderfully rich variations in skin tone, reflecting origins from West and Central Africa. Then you have Latino and Hispanic Americans, who are about 19% of the U.S. population.
And their skin tones often reflect that mix of indigenous and European roots.
Exactly. You often see olive to brown tones,
Mm-hmm.
reflecting what scientists call admixture, basically, a mix of different ancestral genetic lines coming together. Then Asian Americans, around 7% of the population, add all sorts of golden and lighter brown hues to the mix. And of course, European descended Americans generally range from pale ivory to olive. It's just an incredible spectrum.
It really is. But then it's fascinating how those population realities kind of collide with cultural industries, right?
Yeah.
Our sources highlight this pretty significant conflict, especially in the beauty industry.
Yeah, that's a big one.
The advertising in the U.S., it seems, still heavily features very Eurocentric standards,
Yeah.
light skin, narrow noses.
Right, even though the demographic reality has shifted so dramatically.
Exactly. Non-Hispanic whites were only 57% of the population in 2020. That's way down from 85% back in 1960. So how does that stark contrast play out in the media? What kind of controversies does it stir up about what it means to look American?
Well, that disconnect, as you call it, it's not just academic. It creates real challenges. It sparks these constant, often heated discussions about representation, about belonging, about who gets to define American beauty.
So it's an ongoing push for change.
Definitely. You see advocacy groups, consumers, increasingly pushing for advertising that actually reflects the country's diversity. Our sources show the beauty industry is really wrestling with its own identity crisis because of this. It's a slow process, but the pressure is there.
Okay, so from the color of our skin, let's think about overall size, height, and build. National surveys give us averages, right? The average American man is about 5'9", 175 centimeters.
And the average woman about 5'4" or 162 centimeters.
But okay, let's unpack this a bit because averages, as you always say, hide a huge amount of variation.
They absolutely do. It's way too simplistic to just quote an average and think, okay, that's the picture.
So how do ancestral influences play into height and build?
You see definite patterns. For instance, Americans with Scandinavian or Northern European backgrounds often, skew taller, reflecting their ancestral populations.
Makes sense.
Conversely, populations with, say, Mexican, Filipino, or Vietnamese ancestry tend to average a bit shorter. And you see other genetic variations too, like African Americans, on average, tend to display slightly longer limbs and higher muscle density.
And those are traits often linked back to ancestral geography.
That's the theory, yeah. Shaped by genetics over long periods. But, and this is crucial, environment plays a massive role too.
How so?
Our sources point out something really interesting. Children of immigrants often catch up to the national height averages within just 1 or 2 generations.
Really? So better nutrition, maybe?
Exactly. It's a clear sign of how things like nutrition and healthcare, the environment, intersect really powerfully with genetic potential. It helps explain some of those global perceptions of Americans being bigger too, even beyond just weight.
That is fascinating. Okay, let's move on to hair. Our hair also tells its own complex story in the U.S., right? It seems to really weave together biology and cultural identity.
Absolutely. The diversity is incredible. About 45% of Americans have naturally straight hair. That's common among East Asian, Native, and also Northern European lineages.
Okay, almost half.
Then another 40% have wavy hair. You see that often among Mediterranean populations and people with mixed ancestry. And then around 15% have tightly curled or coiled hair, which is most common among African Americans.
And the beauty industry, again, seems to have had a really complicated relationship with this diversity.
Oh, profoundly.
Yeah.
For decades, historically, straightened hair was heavily marketed as more professional, more acceptable.
Which obviously put huge pressure on Black women particularly.
Immense pressure. It sadly marginalized African American women and their natural hair textures.
And this wasn't just a commercial trend, was it? It bled into social norms, maybe even legal issues. What does the rise of natural hair movements tell us about cultural pride now?
It tells us a lot. The growth and strength of natural hair movements today reflect incredible cultural pride, a reclaiming of identity, and a direct rejection of those older Eurocentric standards.
It's a powerful shift.
It really is. It signifies moving from conforming to celebrating who you are. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, think about the Crown Act.
Right. Remind us what that is.
The Crown Act, I think 11 U.S. states have passed it since 2019. It explicitly bans discrimination based on hair texture and protective hairstyles like braids, locks, twists.
So it's making discrimination based on natural hair illegal in workplaces and schools in those states.
Exactly. And it's just a stark reminder that appearance in America isn't just biology. It's deeply intertwined with politics, with legal battles, and the ongoing fight for equity and civil rights.
Absolutely. Critical point. Now, as we're talking about origins and how physical traits get shaped, we absolutely cannot overlook the enduring indigenous legacy in America.
No, definitely not.
Our sources remind us, before European colonization, millions of Native Americans lived across this continent. And even then, there was immense physical diversity shaped by geography itself.
That's right. You had examples like the Inuit in Alaska, who evolved shorter, stockier builds, which helps retain heat in Arctic environments. Whereas Plains tribes often developed taller statures, perhaps more suited to their nomadic hunting lifestyles on the open plains. It just shows how environment and lifestyle shaped diverse physical traits long before the more recent waves of migration. The continent itself was already a place of human adaptation.
And this legacy is still very much alive today and maybe more widespread than many people even realize.
Definitely. Today, about 6.7 million Americans identify as Native American or Alaska Native.
But here's something our sources highlight that's even more profound. Genetic studies show indigenous ancestry actually appears in millions more Americans who might not culturally identify that way.
Right, it's often a hidden part of the family tree.
Exactly. Many families carry these subtle traits, maybe high cheekbones or almond-shaped eyes or thicker hair, and it's part of this indigenous legacy they carry, often completely unknowingly.
Which brings us really to this very heated, very complex debate.
Is there a typical American look?
Exactly.
Huh?
Is there? Could there ever be? And how on earth would you even begin to define that in a population this varied?
It's fascinating how our sources lay out these conflicting viewpoints. On one hand, some argue that, yeah, despite all the diversity, Americans maybe do share a kind of look.
What kind of look are they talking about?
Things like broad smiles, maybe a certain casual fashion sense, or even a kind of cultural confidence that goes beyond just genetics. Is that more about shared culture than physical type?
That seems to be the argument, yes.
Yeah.
But then plenty of others push back hard. They argue the U.S. is just too vast, too mixed for any single phenotype, the observable physical traits to truly dominate.
Right, and this raises that question about perception versus reality, doesn't it? Especially how America is viewed from the outside.
Oh, absolutely. That's where the global perspective gets really interesting. Our sources mention that in global surveys, foreigners often describe Americans as, well, bigger.
Bigger how? Taller. Heavier.
Both, it seems. Taller, heavier, maybe with broader frames. Why do you think that perception holds so strongly?
Well, this perception, unfortunately, does get some backing from data. Our sources point out the U.S. has one of the highest obesity rates in the developed world, something like 42% of adults.
Wow, 42%. That's, yeah.
And that, unfortunately, does shape how the world views the quote-unquote American body.
But crucially, within the U.S. itself, many communities reject that stereotype.
Completely. They point to athleticism, they point to the sheer diversity we've been talking about, and beauty ideals that are constantly shifting and evolving with different cultures. The reality on the ground is just far more nuanced.
So you get this real disconnect between that external perception and the internal lived experience.
It's a powerful tension, isn't it? This whole debate about a typical American look really seems to capture that struggle between a maybe oversimplified image and this incredibly rich, complex reality.
It does. And our sources use this really beautiful analogy to capture it, moving away from the old melting pot idea.
Towards a mosaic.
Exactly. Yeah. Picture walking through Times Square in New York City. You might see a blonde-haired, blue-eyed tourist from Iowa standing right next to a student wearing a hijab from Dearborn, Michigan.
Okay.
And beside them is a Mexican-American street performer, or maybe a native artist selling jewelry nearby. It's not a melting pot where all the differences dissolve. It's a mosaic where each tile keeps its unique color, but together they create this much larger, incredibly intricate picture.
That feels like the emotional heart of it, doesn't it? Looking around and realizing no single face could ever capture the whole thing.
Precisely.
So looking ahead, that brings us to the future face of America, and it sounds like it's going to be even more dynamic. Demographers are predicting some really significant changes by 2060.
What are the big headlines there?
Well, nearly 1 in 3 Americans are projected to be Hispanic, about 1 in 10 Asian, and multiracial groups that they're expected to grow the fastest out of everyone.
Wow, and I assume intermarriage plays a big role in that projection too.
Absolutely. Geneticists point out that intermarriage, which is already pretty common, about 17% of new marriages are interracial or interethnic, will just continue to blur those traditional boundaries.
Producing features that mix across continents even more.
Exactly. So, how are these kinds of projections being received? Our sources touch on different reactions, right? Are people generally more focused on a potential loss of identity, or do they see it more as a strength?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the sources show both perspectives are definitely out there. Some people do worry about a perceived loss of identity as these lines blur more and more. There's a fear, perhaps, that established cultural markers might fade.
But the other side sees strength.
Yes, and crucially, many others see incredible strength in this growing diversity. And, from a scientific standpoint, the argument is pretty compelling.
In what way?
Well, scientists argue that greater genetic diversity can actually improve population health and adaptability. It gives you a broader gene pool, which can potentially increase resilience to things like diseases or environmental changes.
So, in a way, the very thing we've been exploring, this incredible physical difference, might actually be the American future's greatest strength.
It could be. Resilience born directly from difference itself. That's a powerful idea emerging from the science.
So what do Americans look like? Some might give you a quick answer: tall, maybe loud, often smiling. But others, maybe after listening to this deep dive, might just say diverse, undefinable, impossible to pin down.
I think that's closer to the truth. Americans look like the world. Their face isn't one single portrait. It's a huge, evolving gallery.
And that gallery is still being painted every single day.
Yeah. So maybe next time you look in the mirror or just look at the faces around you on the street, think about how your own story, maybe even parts of it you don't know, contributes to this incredible American mosaic.
What subtle feature, maybe in your own face or your family's, might tell a little tale of distant origins? How does that shape this constantly evolving idea of what it even means to look American?
It's something to reflect on.
Definitely. If this deep dive made you think differently about the incredible human tapestry of the United States, then maybe that conversation, the one about what it truly means to look American, is one worth having and certainly worth exploring further.